Hello guys, this is Elias with you guys once again. Today we will be going over programming homework number 5 and for computer science 2. We were given 3 questions. The first one was 10.8 lab, which is exception handling to detect input string versus integer, The second one was 10.9 lab, exceptions with list. And the final question given to us was 10.12 lab student info. And the third being the 10.12 lab, which is student info not found, custom exception type. So we'll get right into it. I'll hop on over to where I coded, which I use PyCharm to code everything that I do. So here in PyCharm you can see that I started up with, give me a second. I started up with the 10.8 lab, which the 10.8 lab wanted us to accept an input as a name and a number, with the exception that if the user types in 2 names and a number, it won't accept the second name and it will set our number value to 0. But if the user inputs a name and the number value, it will print out the name and the number increased by 1. So we'll go ahead and run this really quick. So I click run, type in Jake, enter number 2, it gives us Jake 3, and it also is on a while loop, so as long as I don't type in -1, it will continue running through this loop. So we'll go ahead and try by typing in Jake Logan, 2 names, and the number 3 as well. Since we typed 2 names, it won't accept the second or our input of a number. It would just set the first name and set our number value to 0, as you see there. So first code is working. We'll go ahead and continue by ending this program. So then we go over to our second one that we did, which was the 10.9 lab. So exceptions with lists. Here we have a list of names, and we have our try and accept. So practically what it wants us to do is to type in an input, which is the place that we want to know, or the index that we want to know, and it'll print out the name of and the name of such location. So the exception is if the index error happens. So if we type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if our number is greater than how big our list is, it'll do that index error exception and it'll print out the closest name. If the exception is before our number or before the first number of our list, it'll type in the first name. If the exception is if the index error is past our last number of our list, then it'll type in the last name that we have here. So we can simply run this code. I'll run this one, not that one. Okay. Type in a place 5. It gives us what would be an index value number 5, which is Jane. Let's say we type in 12, and this should be outside of our list. It should give us an exception. So exception, list index out of range. The closest name is Johnny. So it went out of range, so it gave us the last. So we'll do another exception, this time with the number way before our list even starts. So we'll do 12, -12, exception, the list index out of range. The closest name is Riley, which is our first name in our list. So exceptions for lists seems to be working. We'll head on over to our final and last question, which was section 10.12 lab, custom exceptions. So here we have a dictionary that has the name and the ID of a person. And we made 2 custom functions, which is the find ID and find name. So if there is an exception, meaning that our name or our ID is not there, depending on which one we choose, it'll print out a message. This message will say, let's see. So this message will say either if they use the find ID, student ID not found for, and the name they typed in, or if they use the find name, it should say student name not found for and the ID they give us. So we'll go ahead and run this code really quick. run it. So type 0 for search by name or 1 to search by ID. We'll search by name. Name, we know Reagan is in that list. So we'll type in Reagan. We'll hit enter and it should give us this value of Rebrad Shaw 835. Sure enough, it did. I'll go ahead and run one where our name or the ID is not in our dictionary, so you guys can see the exception. So I'll do the same. We want to type in a name as Tyler. Since Tyler's not in our dictionary, it should pop out our exception, which it did. Student ID not found for Tyler. So far so good. I'll go ahead and run our function for ID and run our exception for ID to make sure those work as well. So one, type ID, do PSTOTT885, which is the ID for Peyton. Sure enough, it gave us that info, and now we'll type an ID that doesn't exist to go ahead and run our exception. So gotcha for 45. Student name not found for gotcha 45. So far so good. Everything seems to be working, and that will complete my homework 5 for computer science. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye.